Greetings. It's Monday, April the 28th, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. It's been 98 days since Donald Trump returned to the Oval Office, and there are still no arrests, indictments, or even significant announcements pertaining to the doings of the late Jeffrey Epstein. Nothing. Just silence. Last I heard was about several weeks ago, as I recall, is that the FBI was going over the Epstein files for what was quoted as national security reasons, prior to their release, of course. Yep, always get that one, don't we? Nothing since. Sadly, the witnesses in this horrible, horrible case are beginning to be disappear. Virginia Giuffre, the lead victim witness against the Epstein sex trafficking ring, has died by what is being reported as suicide that occurred at her home in a remote part of Western Australia. Yeah, right. The late Miss Giuffre had accused Prince Andrew of the United Kingdom of sexually abusing her, courtesy of Mr. Epstein, from the time she was 17. She sued the brother of the current British monarch, King Charles III. The two settled out of court to the tune of what is said to have been several $1 million. The way she told her story, hers was a life of being passed around to rich, powerful men like a toy at a party. What a horrible life she endured. A life from which she could never recover. Miss Giuffre was also involved in an accident with a bus several weeks ago. She survived that brush with death. But she is now dead at age 41 by her own hand. The exact method of her demise has not been announced. Police in Australia say they are investigating, but they don't see any initial signs of foul play. I see. The people who run our world, so many of them, are evil and corrupt beyond the ability of the average man or woman to even imagine. And they aren't even trying to hide it anymore. And what are people going to do about it? Well, if the past is any guide, probably nothing. And speaking of the evil elite, Canada is holding an election today. The contest between a conservative Canadian politician and a globalist stooge who has never been elected to anything. A close race, we are told. I wonder who is going to win and how badly the Canadian people are going to lose. Something to watch. In other world news, India and Pakistan are squaring off for what could turn into a nasty regional war between the two longtime adversaries. This all stems from several dozen tourists in Kashmir being gunned down by what has been described as Pakistani terrorists. The big worry, of course, is both nations are nuclear armed and really, really hate each other down to the biological level, pretty much the DNA racial level. It's important to keep in mind that this sort of thing is not new in that part of the world. Both India and Pakistan have had nuclear weapons for several decades, and they've yet to use them on each other. And there have been dust-ups that have occurred in the recent past that were just as worrying as what we're seeing now. No one can predict what can or will happen, of course, but from my personal knowledge and experience, there is far more in the way of rational minds on both sides than we in the West give them credit for. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to briefly interview the Indian equivalent of what we in the United States would call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a rather accomplished general, had a very long history, a very personable guy. And during my interview with him, he pointed out that nuclear weapons are not weapons in the conventional thinking. They are political in nature. They're never meant to be used, and only to deter an adversary so that conflicts will have to be directed elsewhere and by other means. He had a very eloquent explanation of this. Apparently, mutually assured destruction applies to everyone and everywhere. Now, that was some years ago. I hope that such cool heads are still working behind the scenes. The one thing I have learned over the years in studying these things is that both India and Pakistan have very, very good command and control of their respective nuclear arsenals. They're not targets of terrorists. They're very, very, very careful with what they have. That's an important consideration in this often unstable, terrorist-friendly world. But will they use them in a fit of racial anger that goes back millennia? One can hope not. But it doesn't pay to worry about what you can't control. So don't. And elsewhere in the world of conflict, Iran and the United States are talking with the aim of heading off a Persian nuke coming into existence and a possible war between Israel and its vassal state, the United States. Talking is good. Talking is always good when it comes to such things. An explosion at a major Iranian port the other day put everyone on edge for a few hours with the thought that Israel or the U.S. had attacked Iran. Reports are now that the disaster was caused by a chemical component used in the making of rocket fuel. That's what went boom. And it needs to be pointed out that industrial accidents of that kind are not uncommon in Iran. They are stretching their abilities. And considering they do have nuclear reactors, well, you can hope that their worst enemy is not themselves. Now, while the Iranians and Americans are making efforts at peace, the Russians and Ukrainians are not. The head of the Ukrainian regime, Mr. Zelensky, former comedian and TV star, does not seem to be interested in ending the war that has cost the lives of what are thought to be millions of people, both Ukrainians and Russians. For his part, President Putin doesn't seem to be in a hurry either. Why? Well, that's up to speculation. President Trump and Zelensky had an impromptu meeting at the Vatican following the funeral of Pope Francis in St. Peter's Basilica, of all places. No one is really sure what the two discussed or what will come of it, if anything. Meanwhile, people continue to die by the thousands, needlessly. Although it's obvious that Mr. Trump wants to see this war ended, if the other two aren't going to dance, they're not going to dance, Mr. President. But keep trying. Oh, and North Korea is sending more troops to fight in the conflict on the side of Russia. Isn't that nice of them? Beware of the drones, kiddies. Beware of those little, fast, impossible-to-stop anti-personnel drones. They're the future of warfare, or in your case, the present. And speaking of war, the trade war between China and the United States continues, and Americans are about to feel the pinch. All that cheap stuff made in China and made almost nowhere else will be vanishing from our nation's shelves very soon. And there is nothing that's going to replace it in most places. American factories will take time to be rebuilt, retooled, and restarted. That's going to take time and patience. And do Americans have either at this point? On the bright side, this could be a blessing in disguise for the United States and its people. Let's face it, Americans buy too much junk and don't take care of most of the junk they already own. Just drive by some houses in the countryside, or go out and look at the stuff that's being thrown away in the more affluent suburbs around Washington, D.C. It's shocking. All this consumerism, it drives our lives and our culture into a place that can best be described as diseased. Our ancestors had relatively little stuff, compared to what we have. You might want to check out the old George Carlin routine, the George Carlin comedy routine called Stuff. It's actually quite funny and just as timely now as it was many years ago. If you really think about it, the root of all evil isn't money, but unbridled consumerism. That sure can be. Everyone who's seen footage from the latest riots in our cities see the type of looting that goes on. It's usually athletic shoes and booze and other stuff that's been carried off. Yet seldom does anyone see a bookstore broken into and robbed. You ever heard of that? You ever heard of during a riot, someone's going to go into a bookstore and pillage the place of Shakespeare, Einstein, all the classics, or even how-to books on how to cook and sew? You don't find that either, do you? Well, you're going to be seeing shortages this summer of a lot of stuff. Just get ready for it. This is what you voted for, people. It's what you asked for, and it's what you're going to get. The United States needs to return to having a manufacturing base that can pretty much service its needs. But it's not going to be easy to get there. And Donald Trump knows he only has 4 years in office to make it happen, as well as the people surrounding him. It's going to hurt a little bit. So you're going to have to do without. A lot of stuff you're going to have to do without. And you're going to have to get creative. Playing a game of cards with their friends down the street. Going out and having a picnic or something with local food. Instead of sitting in front of your new flat-screen television that takes up an entire wall and over-entertain yourself with mindless nonsense that is put together by people who are equally mindless. A little bit of suffering's good for the soul, America, and it's about time you worked on your soul. In closing, I'd like to touch on something that has been brought to my attention concerning AI. Yes, that again. I count myself among those who think that artificial intelligence is the worst thing that humans have come up with since nuclear weapons, and I'm not apologizing for it. But all that aside, there is a curious attack underway to change our history and cultural history using thinking machines, i.e. AI. This is especially true when it comes to photographs and other historic media that were collected over the centuries. I'm pointing out photographs, especially photographs taken in wartime. Some people have thought it's a good idea to take existing public domain pictures that were taken in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and even back to the Civil War and other such instances, and to change them, to make them better, to make them more interesting, and then throw them out to the internet. That is a crime, really. You can't say it any other way, because when you alter the past that way and confuse it with something that is real, nobody knows what went on where. For example, if you see a photograph taken of American GIs sitting on a street having coffee, and then you insert a German soldier sitting down and having coffee with them, and I've seen that picture, it puts everything out of context. And once that's out there, and if it's good enough, it's going to be hard to tell from the original. What's a future historian going to think? There's all that sorts of nonsense. There's photographs that have been put out there that were taken during reenactment events of World War II that are now being put out as being taken at D-Day. It's completely confusing our history. Also, narratives are being rewritten to be improved. I've seen stuff online that I knew for a fact was fact, and then I'm finding out that it's being considered fiction. I have paper books that would back me up in some of these cases, but a lot of people aren't using those anymore, quite sadly. The technology is getting better and better at faking reality, and now faking history. This is right out of a nasty dystopian science fiction novel of only a few years ago. Right now, it's possible to create video evidence of somebody doing something horrible and it's getting harder and harder to spot it as a fake. One of the things you're seeing come out now is using a special AI filter to make it look like a video surveillance system is in play, and that gets rid of a whole bunch of little telltale signs of AI coming up with something. Soon, it's not going to be possible to tell reality from fiction. So, if somebody wants to make a video of you committing a murder, what defense are you going to have if it's put together so well with such advanced technology you can't tell the difference? This is not a good sign, and it's not a good development, and we are well past the point where legislation is something that's a consideration. Some sort of action needs to be taken to stop this, and, if possible, reverse it. In some cases, like with historic photos, it may be too late. But the concern is going to be for somebody who is politically targeted by a hostile, say, presidential administration, and have evidence manufactured so that they're put away and given a knife in the back in the communal shower while they're in prison. This sort of horror is possible now, and people need to be aware of that. Yes, we are at the mercy of the machines and those who are in control of them. And something tells me the machines won't be very merciful. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies. They're in just as much peril as you are these days. And please consider a paid subscription or a donation to new equipment. It will keep the lights on literally and figuratively. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. The address there is aureliancolumn.substack.com, and if you send me a direct message, I will receive it, and we'll try to get back to you. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World, the Deep State, and artificial intelligence must be destroyed. Good day.